Thank you so much for joining me. So, sir, today there was a piece of news on Treasury Department designating Afghan individuals who has been facilitating finance for ISK, and they're responsible for a lot of attacks in Afghanistan. What's your thoughts about it? What do you think?
I think if they can find, as with most organizations, especially terrorist organizations, if you can find the money and track the money, and trace that and who's kind of supplying it or facilitating it, a lot of times you can cause those organizations a great amount of problems. So anybody that they can do or anybody that they can find that is doing that and identify them, I think is definitely a good thing for sure.
So you have served in defense and in the Air Force and saving Afghan lives basically in Afghanistan. What is next for U.S. defense policy when it comes to dealing with ISK threat in Afghanistan?
Yeah, I think it's going to be, I think they've got a lot of debate considerations that they're going to have to figure out how they want to do that as far as the strategy for the administration, and then really the strategy for the Department of Defense to figure out how to contain ISIS. Obviously, if you're not in close proximity to them, and so you don't have good intelligence on the ground or have the ability to see what they're doing close up, it becomes more difficult to do that engagement or to execute an effective strategy of getting after or finding the right people to take out in the organization to make them, hopefully render them ineffective. So I think they've got some serious work to do to figure out what that strategy is going to be. I wish I could say there was one good answer to it, but the way things are right now and kind of the way things are on the ground right now, that's a very difficult question.
Secretary Austin, during his visit to Middle East and Bahrain, he stressed on over the horizon counterterrorism mission, including in Afghanistan, and your Air Force. How challenging it is to think of it that this is a successful mission in the way as used to be that with the U.S. presence in Afghanistan.
It's definitely a greater challenge because you have the intelligence gathering challenge where you no longer have organizations on the ground that can give you, I'll say, near real-time human intelligence, if you will, of what's going on and what's happening inside of some of these organizations. You can get that from overhead assets, so drones, satellites, those kind of things, signals, intelligence or interceptions or whatever. But getting it that very last little bit so you get very specific locations and very specific information becomes a lot more difficult when you're doing it, quote unquote, over the horizon. So the intelligence gathering becomes much more difficult, and it becomes harder to be very specific on targeting. It's not to say that it can't be done. It just is. It's just more deliberate and time consuming to do it and be effective.
Yeah, and Taliban also refused cooperating with any kind of things like defense when it comes to defense with U.S. And there's a regional diplomacy going on, and still they don't have a government to be recognized. Anyhow, so you have been involved in evacuating some of these Afghan pilots to the U.S. First of all, congratulations for the mission. At the same time, there are so many adults left behind. Is there any kind of hope for them?
I think there is. It's been a challenge up to now. Obviously, we have a lot of work for the organization left to do. They do have, and there is a chance of us being able to take care of them and ultimately get them and their families out. But we're going to have a ways to go, or we've got a ways to go to make it happen. It's going to be a slow process. Is really the best way of putting it, and hopefully, highlighting our families, the Afghan Air Force and Special Mission Wing members and their families, you know, many of them were trained in the United States. They know English. We flew with them, so we have close personal relationships with them, and they kind of put their faith, trust, and confidence in us as a country and a really a way of life. And so we feel like we owe it to them to do everything we can to pay that back, to get them to a point of safety, or to get them to a point where they can have a new start, in this case, with a new life with the same folks that they worked with and fought with. So, you know, that's kind of why we're doing it, is we feel like we owe it to them, and we feel like we owe them a debt of gratitude for taking care of us when we were over there also.
So how do you see the Taliban capabilities to fight the ISK, and they will not allow any kind of terrorist groups to use Afghan soil to pose any kind of threat to the West?
I'm sort of the opinion I'll believe that when I see it, you know, based on what the Taliban have done in the past and what we think they're doing over there right now. You know, we do know that they are not allied with ISIS in any way. So, you know, they've definitely got some capacity to fight them. I don't know. It's hard to really tell, not being on the ground, how they're going to try to do that, or if they're going to try to engage or employ either other organizations to help them, or work with them to try to defeat ISIS. So it's an evolving situation with that, and I think the Taliban probably has their hands full, because ISIS is a credible force and a credible fighting force. So they definitely can't ignore them. That's for certain, and they need to, for their own. I guess I'd say for their credibility with the Afghans of being able to govern and protect the people in the country, they need to defeat ISIS. So I'm sure it's a high priority for them.
Sure. I just received another question from my managers. They're asking, like, many Afghan commanders are a member of the special forces and at the same time President Protection Services. They're still in Afghanistan. So sometimes they're not even eligible for applying an SIV or P1 or P2 visa, but they're still under the imminent threat by the Taliban. Does U.S. government, especially like DoD, they have any plan to evacuate these folks from Afghanistan?
You know, right now we're trying to, I'll say, advocate and make sure that that is known. There's situations where some of these individuals don't have a clear path to be evacuated, but obviously were critical in what was going on inside of Afghanistan during our 20 years and our time there. So the conversation's got to be had for getting some level of prioritization for a lot of these individuals that were in the military and in the government working with U.S. forces that are under a unique set of threats. There's no clear path right now. Even the path for the P1s, which are primarily, you know, Afghan military, the path for the P1s is not clear either, even though they worked with us, they trained with us, we fought with them. Even that path is not a clear and easy one right now. So we're just trying to have the conversation and trying to get the exposure to say, hey, maybe that category is a little bit too broad for everybody that we're talking about. Maybe we need to have some subcategories or a little bit of prioritization within it for the ones that are most at risk in country, and the ones that we invested a lot of time and money and effort in and with, because we know if we can get them out and get them taken care of, they'll be forever grateful, you know, for us doing that. So that's our challenge right now, and unfortunately, I'd like to say there is a clear path, but there's not at this point. But we're working on trying to impact that.
So, sir, you have served with Air Force. What lessons learned from being involved militarily in Afghanistan? What has been working? What didn't work?
You know, I can't speak for, you know, the other forces that were over there, but I'll say, you know, during my time over there, before I was over there, and really after I left, the Afghan Air Force story and the Afghan Special Mission Wing and Commando story were really three good news stories in Afghanistan as far as the forces and how they were trained and how we trained and advised and assisted them for them to build and grow. And, you know, hopefully our intent was for them to eventually become independent and be an independent force. Um, there were challenges along the way. There's always going to be challenges along the way, but, you know, because we were so close with them and advising them and working with them both when they came back here to the United States to train. A lot of times it was the same individuals then that would be over advising them in Afghanistan. So, you know, we had that familiarity, we had personal relationships. We tried to build a culture of trust and communication, so they knew they could reach out to us if they had problems, even if we weren't in Afghanistan with them. But, you know, even if they were having issues or concerns of how they were fighting or employing and working, they knew they had somebody they could go to and talk to. And so for us, I think that the biggest thing was that made it successful is we were willing to work with them all the way down to the lowest level on the flight line or in the airplanes or on the ground. And we were willing to work with them all the way to the highest level. I mean, there was more than once where I would fly a mission, an A-29 mission with a captain in the Afghan Air Force. And then that afternoon, I would go see the commander-in-chief of the Afghan Air Force for a key leader engagement. So, you know, if that's not going from the lowest to the highest level, I don't know what is. But it seemed like that was a real success story for us.
So last question, sir. With this airstrikes, as you say, there was some shortage and a lot of civilians killed, but none of these military personnel has been taken accountable for the death of these civilians. What are your thoughts about it?
Are you talking civilians killed from
airstrikes?
Yeah, I think the most difficult thing that's been, I can't really speak for the last few years because I wasn't over there. The most difficult thing is the narrative that's behind it, and being able to, you know, the Taliban always want to try to pin the blame on a lot of times people that they killed. They wanted to try to pin the blame on, you know, either the military or the coalition military or whatever the case may be. I know in our case, and when I was over there, we did our best to try to find out the truth when something like that happened. And then if there was something, God forbid, happened where the wrong individuals were either targeted or something happened to them, we tried to do everything we possibly could to change procedures so that it wouldn't happen again. You know, a civilian being killed in a combat zone is never right or correct, but the sad fact is sometimes it unfortunately is going to happen, and trying to keep that to an absolute minimum and zero if at all possible is the ultimate goal. And so I think one of the biggest things really in my time over there was trying to get the true accountability of what really happened on the ground. And so when we tried to do it, that was a lot of times our most difficult thing, to really pin down exactly the who, what, when, why, and how on the ground, to tie it to either something we were doing right or something we were doing wrong, so we could change it, to do everything we could to mitigate it.